I'm Wilson Lai, and you're listening to Deep Cut. On Deep Cut, we usually compare a director's most popular film with a personal favorite chosen by one of us. We also discuss that director's life and career to bring in context that helps us view their movies as they may want us to. If you're enjoying the show, please remember to give us a rating or a review and subscribe to us wherever you listen to podcasts. This will help others discover the show. You can also keep up with us at Deep Cut Pod on Instagram, Facebook, and Letterboxd. And if you want to talk about this movie with us, or any other film, TV, or anything else, please join us on our Discord server. And if you're a big fan of the show, we also have a Patreon if you want to help support us. Click the link in our description, or you can go to deepcutpod.com to find our Patreon, Discord, and all the other socials that we've mentioned here. Neo Sora is a Japanese-American filmmaker who premiered his first narrative feature film, Happyend, at this year's Venice Film Festival. Happyend is set in Tokyo in the near future, chronicling the lives of a group of delinquent high school friends as they go through their final year. The film centers on two of these friends, Yuta and Ko, whose childhood friendship comes into question as Ko, a Zainichi Korean, gets drawn into protest movements and activism as their school begins to employ an authoritarian surveillance system. This is all set in front of a backdrop of a government trying to exercise more control, enacting an emergency decree after a big earthquake. In this film, the personal and the political crisscross in natural and powerful ways. I was really struck by the stylistic work in this film, particularly the score by Leah Ouyang-Rusli, cinematography by Bill Kirstein, and editing by Albert Tholen. Neo, who was a fellow graduate of Wesleyan University, was kind enough to lend me some time when he was in Hong Kong presenting the film as part of the Hong Kong Asian Film Festival. We had a lovely chat about the film, his inspirations, and his own activism on the festival circuit. Happyend will play at this upcoming Singaporean International Film Festival on December 7th and 8th, and will soon open in Singapore, Hong Kong, and the US. Here is our interview. I think I've got the hang of hosting the podcast, but doing the interviews bit of it sort of freaks me out sometimes.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm just getting my hours in, but also speaking to awesome filmmakers.
We're just two Wesleyan grads.
Exactly.
In Hong Kong.
Yeah, just hanging out with two microphones.
Yes.
When did you graduate from Wesleyan Yale?
I graduated 2014. So technically I was supposed to graduate 2013, but I stayed back a year because I did a internship abroad and stuff like that. So I ended up graduating 2014.
Okay, yeah. Cool. And we both were film studies majors at the school. What did you think about, I guess, your film studies education at Wesleyan, or just in general, your time at Wesleyan?
I mean, it was... I feel like everyone has good and bad kind of experiences at school. At Wesleyan's film major, I was really rebellious, actually. I feel like I was really kind of not into the neo-formalist education of the film department at the time.
Yeah.
There was such an insistence on thinking about film only through the image and sound. And whatever kind of social context was mostly about market or star.
Yes.
Everything that kind of Janine was sort of thinking about, right. I guess. Whenever I would try to bring in, so I was also a philosophy major, and whenever I would try to bring in theory into the reading of a movie, I feel like I was always shut down.
Yes.
And because I was a young, rebellious dude, whenever I would be shut down, I would try to go more towards that. And so I became really interested in more I don't know, just deconstructivist type films, I guess. But then what's interesting is I feel like ultimately I really actually appreciated the neo-formalist education, because in making the film, it was actually really useful to have this background of just like shot breakdown,
Yes.
like, you know, doing that kind of thing. So.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I think like, I don't think much had changed from the time that you left Wesleyan. Well, I started in 2015, so I think there was still a very like neo-formalist approach to film education. But I guess the beauty of being at a place like Wesleyan is like you're able to tap into that kind of discourse or have those kind of conversations outside of the film department. Yeah. Thank you for this movie. Like, I really, really enjoyed watching Happyend. I thought it was like, even though it's set in the future, it feels very of the moment in a very important kind of way, especially these last few years with political discourse and making a coming of age film that's not just about like a personal coming of age, but also like a political like realization is something that like I related to a lot. I wanted to just talk about what inspired you to make this movie and tackle these subjects.
Sure. I mean, so I started writing this movie like 7 years ago. So I guess I was mainly responding to a lot of the things that I had been experiencing and feeling like until then. So I guess 7 years ago makes me like 26 years old. Yeah. But really, a lot of the inspiration that I was drawing from comes from my actual high school life, but then also I personally had a political awakening in university at Wesleyan. Yeah. But that really came from experiencing Fukushima. So 3/11, there was a big earthquake and then tsunami and then the nuclear meltdown, which triggered the anti-nuclear protests. And I remember there was like one time where a really close friend of mine and I was actually in London doing this internship that I mentioned earlier. And we had been like discussing the pros and cons of like nuclear energy over email. Wow. And I was supposed to be like an emailing or kind of picking up the phone for this production company that I was interning at and taking calls and stuff like that. But for some reason, we just got into like a really long email debate about he was pro-nuclear and I was anti-nuclear. Yeah. And every morning I would wake up, there's time difference. I would wake up, go to work, and then open my email to find that they like emailed me their response, which was like a super long, detailed, like well-researched response about why nuclear energy was actually necessary. Yeah. And then I would respond and like take the whole day of work to like research and craft my kind of detailed response about why it was actually bad.
Yeah. I would say that's a good use of your time.
I guess so. I think so. Yeah, I probably missed some calls. So my theoretical, like political wrestling with my friends became the groundwork for my own political awakening and my motivation to learn more about political and social structures. And then experiencing like firsthand some of the anti-nuclear movement in Japan, because I would go back to Japan in the summers or winters and stuff. And then I went to these protests where I think it was like 100,000 people showed up in front of the National Diet in Japan, which was kind of unheard of in Japan, in at least like modern, like contemporary Japanese society. Right. You know, you hear stories and you watch films about how Japan was really showing up during the student protest movement in the 60s and 70s. The streets were covered in like helmet wearing, like stick wielding students fighting cops and stuff like that. Yeah. But that really died down. And I personally had not experienced like any big protest movement. In fact, I feel like the general impression of Japan is that it's really like apolitical. But this anti-nuclear movement was like huge. Yeah. And there was like an energy on the streets. And I took that energy back to the US, where immediately after Fukushima kind of started to happen, Occupy Wall Street started to happen in the US. Then a little bit after that, Black Lives Matter started to happen. And then 2016, Trump became, and then now Trump again. And then, but, you know, so then I was like really experiencing all of these like social movements at the same time as my own political awakening. So then that really like lit the fire for me. But then that really like led to me developing my own ideological ground for certain things and thoughts. And I think over the course of that, I feel like I started to push some of my friends away.
Yeah.
But then some of my friends would also like cut me off or push me away as well for different reasons. And like, I find friends to be like one of the most important things in my life, especially looking back to my high school years where like I really had a extremely close-knit group of friends,
right.
like 5-ish friends who I spent like all of my time with. And I really like brought that value of friendship to university as well. And so I feel like I don't know, the loss of it, really the kind of theme and the core of the film is like how you lose friends due to political differences, and like the sadness of that. And I feel like those are the things I was thinking about when I started to like write the film.
Yeah. So the core of that friendship, or the loss of that friendship between Ko and Yuta, was that, I guess, the seed idea that you sort of launched this screenplay from? Yeah.
I mean, the first draft of the screenplay that I wrote in 2017 was like way different. It was more extreme.
Okay. What kind of extreme was it?
The film ended with Ko joining like an armed militia in the mountains, waiting for like the earthquake to come to start a revolution and stuff like that. But
wow,
it was like a little bit.
What was like holding you back from ending it like that?
Well, I was, once I finished that, I was like, you know what, let me like go back to what I originally started off writing film for. What's the core of the film? And I was like, oh, it's actually about the friendship.
Yes.
And so I was like, let me try to do a version where I'm like cutting out all the extraneous excess of the film that's not part of the core.
Right.
And then ultimately what I ended up being left with was what we see now.
Yeah. And the way that you paint this friend group, this core friend group, is so beautiful. I think they had such great chemistry. And I wanted to know, when you were writing it, did you have these characters fleshed out in your mind already? Or did you cast them and then shape this friend group dynamic after you casted them?
No. So the characters that you see on screen now are actually remarkably the same as the characters in the script. Wow. I barely changed like the dialogue or the descriptions. So those characters that I kind of wrote were very much based on like aspects of my own personality that I like distributed amongst the different characters, but then also like taking inspiration from just like my actual friends and people that I knew. And I was like, I really didn't want any of the characters to like actually represent any specific individual that I had in mind, because I definitely felt like as a screenwriter, a filmmaker, like you really need to have the characters stand on their own 2 feet as independent people. That's not like a referent or a reference to like a real person, And so over the course of the drafts, I really that was like the real hard work, which was making sure that these characters have a life of their own.
Right.
But then what was amazing is that through the casting process, we ended up finding people who were remarkably similar or like had aspects of the characters already. And so once we like found those people cast, the workshop really was more geared towards like, and the rehearsals were more geared towards how the actors can like just be themselves as much as possible within the context of making a fiction film together.
Right.
But through the dialogue that is like technically prepared for them, like they could express themselves. And so that's what we really focused on.
Could I ask about this workshop? Like, how did you run it, or how long was it? And what did you focus on with the actors?
It started 2 months before the shooting. So the actor who plays Ming, Sheena Peng, she was in New York. So we started it all on Zoom, actually.
Okay.
And so we did like 2 or 3 times a week over Zoom, just like icebreakers, like getting to know each other. We would do things like, I asked everybody, including myself, to prepare just like a topic of conversation that you could talk about, something that you love so much that you can talk about forever, and just present it for like 5 minutes. And so we took turns each, like presenting just like what we were into. We did certain exercises where we would like talk about like two truths and a lie type thing.
Yes,
it's like really basic stuff like that. Really just as an opportunity to get to know each other. And then a month before the shoot, when Sheena came to Japan, we started to do in-person workshops like twice a week or something.
Because everyone else was in Japan.
Everyone else was in Tokyo, yeah. And so we all kind of assembled in like a community center and did a lot of kind of like physical work. One of the things that like marked how I hung out with my friends was that we were just very physically intimate, And I feel like it's kind of true about American friends maybe, but like we would just be like lying on top of each other or like hug all the time or like whatever. So, and I feel like there's some, not all Japanese people are like physically intimate like that. And so.
Did you go to a school in the US?
Yeah, I went to school in the US. I was born and raised in the US. So, and so some of what we did was like, I don't know, we did like super basic stuff, like two people standing across the room from each other. One starts to walk towards the other one. And then the person who's being walked towards just like says something when they feel like their safe space or like their personal space is encroached upon. And so we would like begin to feel like how big people's like personal spaces were. Some of the kids just didn't have any personal, like they just like let people like walk all the way. And then there was one really interesting exercise that actually I was inspired by Ryusuke Hamaguchi about, but when he was doing workshops during his film Happy Hour, which also, where he also worked with a lot of non-actors, he had a dancer come in and apparently they did this exercise where you go in a pair and one person like starts to kind of bend like the other person's body at their will. Just until like the threshold of pain. But then the person who's being like molded has to communicate non-verbally that they can go further or they have to stop because they're in pain. And the other person who's like doing the bending like has to really pay attention to the other person's like non-verbal communication. And I really wanted the actors to really understand like what it means to concentrate on the other person while they're performing and concentrate on the other person's emotions and so and reactions. So actually that exercise was really helpful. And I recommend this to like a lot of my friends too who are about to direct their films, to do this exercise because you can actually go a lot further than you think. It actually doesn't hurt until like you go really far. But you really need to pay attention to what the other person is like giving you, the reaction. And the other person also really has to tell you like how much further you can go. And because you don't want to hurt the other person, you're actually focused so hard on their body language and everything. And that level of concentration, I was telling them, like, that's what you need to have whenever you're in the scene, acting in the scene, to like be locked in. And then otherwise, we would do a lot of what's called like Meisner exercises. Like I really based a lot of the like thought behind theory of acting based on Sanford Meisner, which is about like reacting to the other person. And so, yeah, those were the kinds of workshops we did. But it was really like an opportunity, again, to just have the 5 kids just spend time with each other. Because after the workshop, I would have to leave for something, but they would all go to get dinner. And that's where they became really close friends.
That's really good. So, you can really see that intimacy in the film. Like they're very comfortable with each other, especially with that, like, I guess, physical communication aspect of it. They feel very comfortable around each other.
And it was really crazy because we ended up like, it's a really silly workshop, but we just practiced hugging. And then they all ended up loving hugging each other. And so after every workshop, they like kind of spontaneously would just like, let's do the hugging workshop again and kind of start hugging each other and stuff. It's like
any excuse to hug.
Really cute. Yeah, really adorable.
Let's talk about differences between the kids that you see in the film and regular like Japanese high schoolers. Because you said earlier that they wouldn't be seen like as touchy with each other, and the student body, when I think of local Japanese high school, I would think of a place that is a lot more like homogenous. But in this film, you make it very clear that this is a very diverse school.
Mm-hmm.
And like you have like Tomu's families from the US, Ming's families from Taiwan, and Ko is like Zainichi Korean. So could you speak about the choice to do that and why?
Yeah, totally. I mean, so I never fully went to a Japanese high school, but I did a little bit of like exchange summers and stuff like that at Japanese high schools. And then most of my other experiences and knowledge about Japanese high school life is really just through media or my friends or something, or just observation on the street or whatever.
Yeah.
So to some degree, I was like a little bit nervous whether or not I was getting it right. And I was prepared to be like, oh, well, it's fiction. But like I was actually quite nervous about like, you know, if I was portraying Japanese school life correctly and stuff. But actually, it's been kind of nice to hear the reactions, because a lot of people have been saying it's like super familiar to them. And I'm so glad about that, because I feel like one of the things that I was trying to do was to portray a picture of like a really familiar quotidian Japanese high school life, but then populate it with like faces that you wouldn't necessarily see depicted in like normal Japanese media and movies. So this is, I guess you can call it like diverse, but like one of the things that I was trying to do was to challenge this myth of homogeneity, because one, like on a theoretical level, it never was homogenous. And I think that's a narrative that Japanese modernity really tries to like impose on its citizens and globally in order to, I guess, like unify a national identity and stuff like that. But to be honest, like until the Meiji era, I feel like it was really diverse, you know? I think Ainu people were not part of Japan. Okinawans were not part of Japan. Even within the main Japanese islands, like the difference between people from Kyushu or Aomori are just like very different cultures. The dialects are different enough that you can probably consider it like a really similar language almost. Like sometimes, like if you meet someone from Aomori who like speaks a really deep Aomori accent as a Tokyo person, like there's like not really mutually intelligible. You know what I mean? So Japan is really diverse already, but even more so today, and I suspect in the future, because already after the war, like you have a lot of people who are like a mix of like, for example, if you go towards like Yokohama or Okinawa, where there are a lot of military bases, there are a lot of people who are like half American, for example. And so that exists, of course. And then now, like, especially in the area where I live in Tokyo, there's just a lot of like Indian people who live there, Bangladeshi people. And when you see groups of high schoolers going home from school and stuff like that, like you will see Black Japanese kids. And like, to me, it's like already pretty diverse in a way. Like that's like real Japan. I think it probably depends on where you live as well. Like I live in Tokyo, which probably like makes it more that way. But but also Japan right now is at a place where the population is continuing to decline. And it has like these really honestly awful like immigration policies that like categorize immigrants based on skill level and essentially like lets people have a dignified life in Japan or not based on how like quote unquote skillful you are based on like Japan's completely arbitrary like categorization of how well you do in like STEM fields or whatever. It's like all bullshit basically. But if Japan doesn't let more people in, the population will continue to decline more and more. And for Japan, I think that is like a really, for the Japanese government at least, like I don't mind that Japan just becomes smaller and smaller, you know, but for the Japanese government, that's a really big problem. And so I think we're at a crossroads where it's either Japan lets more immigrants in or not. And so part of my speculation with portraying the near future was whether or not that will happen. And I just wanted to portray a future where that's really normal. So like maybe the second generation of people, like immigrants, now populate the screen, you know? But I also, one of the most important things for me was to portray that in as normal of a way as possible, like not calling too much attention to it, just kind of presenting it as like obvious.
Yeah.
So that was the goal. Yeah.
I think you achieved it very well. And I think they're like, the students don't really acknowledge it, but I guess those in authority make it clear very, like in some moments of the film, like especially when that military guy comes in to talk to the students and the teacher asks all the non-Japanese students to leave the classroom.
Yeah.
And I think that was a very, I guess, telling moment in a film full of telling moments. But that is like basically the clear split between Ko and Yuta, is that Yuta realizes that Ko, or I guess Ko also realizes that he doesn't have the same rights as Yuta. And there's when like the split starts to happen between the two of them. Were you always thinking about framing this friendship in this way, with having Ko be a Zainichi Korean that sort of needed to abide by another set of rules, and Yuta being a more well-off Japanese student, and them being super close, and that being what splits them apart? Is that what you were thinking about from the get-go?
Yeah, I think that was the structure that I had in mind from the very beginning. Mm-hmm. Mainly because, I mean, another backdrop of the film is like all the thoughts that I was having about Japanese colonialism. Right. One of the big, I hate to call it inspiration because it seems like inspiration is like a very positive word, but anyway, the thing I was thinking about the most was there was an earthquake that happened in 1923 on September 1st called the Great Kanto Earthquake, which was like one of the most devastating earthquakes in, I guess, like modern Tokyo history. Yeah. Tens of thousands of people died in the quake and the fire. But something that's really just not talked about that much, at least outside of Japan, is that the earthquake also sparked a really horrible massacre of Zainichi Koreans. But also actually Chinese people and Japanese people who didn't speak the Tokyo dialect, and, disabled people. And so basically upwards of 6,000 people were murdered by normal Japanese civilians. This was because really awful rumors started to spread about Koreans poisoning the wells or setting fires to people's houses or stealing stuff or whatever. Which were all just untrue. Later, the newspapers all like kind of released corrections saying like none of that was true, but it was spurred on by the media, the police, the government, that led these Japanese civilians to create vigilante groups. Right. And they killed people. You can actually even read traces of that from, like, for example, Akira Kurosawa's autobiography talks about this incident because he experienced the Tokyo earthquake. Right. And he was saying like all these people were going crazy about rumors regarding Koreans poisoning the wells. Yeah. And there was like a rumor of like, there was like a mark like with chalk or something on a nearby well that everyone was saying like those are the ones that Koreans have poisoned. And he recalls this because that is like a graffiti, like that's just like, basically as a child, like he kind of just like wrote that as like something a child would do. And so he saw that and realized how ridiculous it is that all these adults were like going crazy over nothing or these rumors. Right. And, thinking about why this happened, I mean, learning about this was a big shock to me because it's not really taught to Japanese people. I think it had been something that until quite recently just was considered historical fact. It just happened, a horrible moment in Japanese history. Yeah. But after the Tokyo governor switched to the current one, who is this woman, right-wing woman named Yuriko Koike, she stopped releasing an apology every year during September 1st. Okay. So before then, it was like sending condolences to both the victims of the earthquake, fires, and also the massacre. But now she kind of like stopped doing the massacre part. And so there's like a big movement to try to get her to like apologize again. But this is a trend within the Japanese right wing and the government of trying to like cover up this history.
Yeah.
And the reason why I think it happened is because of colonial resentment and racism, you know, because the Korean Peninsula was colonized by and occupied by Japan.
Right.
And there were a lot of Korean laborers in Tokyo and everywhere else in Japan at the time. And I think that there was like two levels, right? I think because there was like a independence movement that was like budding or bubbling among the Korean kind of occupied peoples.
Yeah.
The government was very fearful of Koreans, but then also it translated to like resentment amongst Japanese civilians against Koreans.
Yeah.
And in this moment of crisis, that just like came bubbling out.
Yeah.
And at the time that I was actually researching this, it was around 2014. And 2014 also saw a surge in like racist hate crimes and racist demonstrations against Koreans by this like right-wing people who are like, oh, the government's privileging Koreans over Japanese people, like all that stuff. It's like super racist. And they were literally chanting, like, kill them, like on the streets. Like it was so fucking racist, actually. Well, what's kind of cool though was that a lot of the people who became politicized during the anti-nuclear movement then assembled as like an anti-racism kind of movement to counter these racist protests. So it was kind of an awesome scene to see that these like anti-racists were like really fighting, like physically fighting these racists on the street, and did actually a really good job. They really helped to like curtail some of this stuff. And then it also led to like anti-hate speech laws being put into place and stuff like that. So they now kind of like were pressured to stay underground and stuff, but it's not that it goes away, right?
Yeah, the sentiment is still there.
It's still there. And today, like in 2024, you see right-wing nationalism just like spread across the country more and more. Right. And to me, it's like terrifying.
Yeah.
But I mean, you know, it's kind of true everywhere else in the world.
It is.
But anyway, those were the thoughts that I had when I was also writing the script, because part of the emotional core of the film was to portray a friendship that ends due to political differences set in Japan. I basically tried to represent this kind of like colonial dynamic that hasn't gone away through the film and through the characters.
Right. Yeah, because I guess Japan colonized Korea, and that's represented in Ko, and also Taiwan represented in Ming. And I guess the US or Tomu's placement in that is also interesting because of the US like military involvement in Japan that goes on till today.
Yeah. I mean, you know, I didn't want to like make the characters represent anything necessarily. You know, of course, like they're not like, I really tried to make sure that they didn't feel like symbols of something, and they have their own lives and stuff like that. But they are characters that feel the effects of that, you know? And a lot of people kind of see the different aspects of the film and think about it as like separate issues that I'm tackling. But actually, to me, it's all kind of...
I think they're connected.
They're all rooted in colonialism.
Exactly.
The example that I like to bring up the most that I think illustrates all of this is the final law that the emperor put into place after World War II. So after Japan kind of stopped being an empire, the emperor put in place this law called the Foreigner Registration Act, which basically stipulated that all former colonial subjects that until then were like the subjects of the emperor and technically held Japanese citizenship had to all register as foreigners now.
Wow.
So Chinese Koreans, Taiwanese people, Manchurians, like all these people in Japan who the Japanese wanted to deport, all had to register as foreigners now. And that began to define the population in Japan as like Japanese versus foreign. And the institution, the organization that was put into place to control the deportation of these foreigners and also the flow of immigrants in and out is the same body that is the immigration detention system today.
Oh my God. Scary that it's held on.
It's held on. It's just a colonial structure that continues today. And the surveillance of immigration and immigrants, and also like systemic xenophobia, all relates to this, you know? And so the idea of surveillance in the film, the idea of like fascism, growing military power, like all of these things are very much related to the same root cause, which is colonialism.
Right. Maybe we can talk about something a little more lighter.
Sure.
You've said in interviews before that Edward Yang is a very big inspiration to you. And coincidentally, we're on the podcast, we're also doing a whole Edward Yang series.
Nice.
So we're trying to cover almost all of his films. But when I was watching it, I really found traces of Yang stylistically, but also maybe on a big scale, like idea kind of level, like the sort of disillusion of like relationships that Yang likes to focus on. And in particular, I like was thinking a lot about Terrorizers, and especially in that a lot of the earthquake scenes with the curtains moving and like you activating the frame by like moving like a light source in, like a swinging light source. Could you talk about your relationship with Yang and how he informed the film, if my guess is correct?
Yeah, I think it for people who know Edward Yang really well, I feel like you can just see too much of Edward Yang in the film, which I feel like kind of embarrassed about, because I'm like, oh, I wish I like digested it more. But no, I love Edward Yang so much. And I feel like my introduction to Edward Yang was Terrorizers as well. So it's left such a big impression on me. Of course, the comparison that gets made with this film also is Brighter Summer Day, just because it's about like students and stuff. But I mean, I love all of his films so much. And I feel like he is a filmmaker who successfully is able to capture and balance a story about a society and a story about individuals. Just the balance of it is just perfect to me. Kind of more perfect than Ho Xiaoshen, to be honest. Like, I think Ho Xiaoshen sometimes shifts a little bit too much towards like history. Like, I think the subject is history.
It is, yes.
Whereas I think Edward Yang is like, the subject is the city and the individuals, and how they relate to each other. But that also encompasses like moments of history. You know, I think Brighter Summer Day is like very much a moment of history in Taiwan. I think all of his films deal with like the moments of like Taiwan shifting into modernity, and how these individuals are grappling with that. And the framing and the balance with which he is able to capture these individual stories on a social scale, to me, is just like almost like it feels like he's kind of figured out an answer in some way. And because, you know, I didn't necessarily try to like be like, okay, I'm going to make an Edward Yang film, obviously, but because the core of the story of Happyend is a friendship's dissolution due to political differences, I needed to portray the politics part of it, you know, in order to justify some of Ko's emotions. And I feel like in order to portray the politics, you need to portray society. And so when I thought about how to like cinematically portray like society, quote unquote, the framing and scale of some of the shots that are present in Edward Yang's films like really informed where I placed the camera in Happyend, because I really wanted to just like juxtapose the image of the individual against the backdrop of like a larger society. So yeah, super influenced by him. And the other thing that I'm really love about Edward Yang is his humor, his sense of humor. He's really funny, actually. And he is. I feel like almost not a lot of people like talk about that aspect of him, but to me, he's like a really funny filmmaker. And in fact, I think after EE, he was talking about like making a comedy or something. Right. And yeah, I mean, to me,
Confusion is...
Yeah, it is a comedy.
It is a
totally.
I think it's a full-on comedy.
Funnily enough, he was really influenced by Woody Allen. Which is kind of funny. But yeah, I mean, I just love that. And Yeah, when like Bill and I, for example, this cinematographer of Happyend, Bill Kirstein, and I would talk about like how to shoot a scene. And if we were stuck, we would be like, how would Edward Yang film the scene?
HWEY.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That's great. That's really, really great. And I love especially your two shots that you frame like Ko and Yuta in a lot. I think wider shots allow for you to see that dynamic of their friendship. And I think there's also like a few key moments where they're in a two shot where you decide to start tracking in as they like are doing rock, paper, scissors, or they're doing something else. And I was wondering, what was the choice about? Or like, could you explain that choice?
Yeah. I mean, the two shot, I didn't quite realize this until like a couple of days ago, actually, but the two shot of two dudes in the frame seems to be like the thing that I keep coming back to. Like, there's something.
Always rely on it.
Yeah, I don't know why, but like, for some reason, we were looking at like a still of one of my earlier short films called The Chicken, and the main still was like a two shot of the two protagonists just like looking towards the frame, and then I have a short film called Sugar Glass Bottle, which is actually a proof of concept of Happyend. So it's just the same characters played by different actors. And that one is also like, I use two shots a lot because it's about two guys. And then now Happyend's two shot. And I feel like I was kind of like thinking about where that comes from, why I'm like the two shot is just in my head so much. And it actually, in my kind of high school group of friends, I had these two friends who were taller than me, literally, and we would be walking around New York City after school and stuff like that, and they just walk faster because their legs are longer. You know what I mean? And so they just walked way faster than me, and so I would always be like looking at them from the back. Just my two good friends, they were like the same height, like walking ahead of me, and for some reason, just like the two guys like walking ahead of me from the back is just stuck in my head as an image. And so actually one of the first images that came to me in Happyend was two guys carrying a subwoofer together in like a darkened Tokyo street. And I never could shake that image out of my head. And so that kind of forms like the basis of, that's like one of the other inspirations maybe of the film. It's just like two guys with a subwoofer, like with a literal burden in between them. And the tracking, the tracking in the beginning when they're doing rock, paper, scissors, we basically wanted to create a sense that they are in on something together. And so when they're kind of whispering towards each other and doing rock, paper, scissors, like Bill and I really were talking about wanting the camera to like creep up a little bit slowly, as if like we're being let in on their like plan and secret. And so that's why that tracking shot exists.
That was really effective, and it like very keyed me in on like this friendship being the core of the film that you want to like discuss or talk about. I think music is a very big part of their friendship, Yuta and Ko's friendship. And techno music, and people have talked about the link between liberation and like dance music. And I wanted to have you talk about choosing the music for the film, or like the idea that music plays such a big role in this film.
Yeah, I guess like having a space together where you can blast music that you like is such a liberating thing, you know? And I've experienced that personally, just having a space and you can just like blast full volume, whatever music you like. And, you know, something that for me really like, especially in university, like drew me to the friends that I made was music and sharing similar music tastes and discovering new music together. And like, so I feel like I wanted the bond between Yuta and Ko to be mainly based on music, as well as just shared experience. And also because that image that I had, that I told you about, of like just two guys carrying a subwoofer, I was like, I couldn't shake that, you know? And so I tried to incorporate like subwoofer. I mean, I just personally love techno as well, so that's why they listen to techno.
Yeah.
And
I was so surprised to see Yosuke Yukimatsu at the start. I was like, whoa! I saw him at Fuji Rock earlier this year.
Oh, shit.
Incredible
He's
set.
the best. He's like one of the best DJs
How
in the world.
did you get him? Or did you just reach out? Or did you know him?
Well, so I was a huge fan of his just like while living in New York.
Mm-hmm.
I would see his like boiler room set, like whatever.
Yes.
And just be like, damn, he's so good. And he's also just such an iconic looking person.
Yeah, he's always shirtless.
Yeah, exactly. Such an icon. And a bunch of my friends and I went to one of his sets in Japan,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm a little shy, so I couldn't really talk to him, but my friend who's like super not shy, like went up to him and started talking. Turns out he's a huge cinephile.
Oh.
So then like after that, meeting him at that event, whenever I would go to like an art house cinema in Tokyo to go see like a Romero retrospective or Hoshashen retrospective or whatever, he's always there. He's like at all of these movies watching it. And I'd be like, oh my God, like Yosuke, what's going on? And so we would started talking about movies, and he would give me like books, and I would give him books in return. And I lent him like my Edward Yang book, for example.
That's great.
And yeah, we really got along. And so I wrote him literally into the script. I was like, literally Yosuke Yukimatsu's DJ. And he gives him a USB, and I feel like, and so I had to ask him, and he said yes. And so that's how we got him. And so the music that appears in the club scene in the beginning, it's his mix. Like he chose 3 songs. I asked him to do like a 3-song mix, kind of told him what the vibe that I was going for was. And he reached out to one of his friends and chose the music. And so that scene where he's DJing, he's actually DJing.
Wow.
Like,
so like it was not like one of those, I guess, classic club scenes where they don't play the music and they have the actors just jump up and down.
No. We actually like set up huge speakers.
Yes.
We got like a professional like audio person to come in to do the setting, and and we got like a bunch of extras who they didn't necessarily like not club goers, but we by actually playing the music and Yukimatsu doing his thing, like I think we really got the vibe of a club. And actually that's something I really wanted to get right, because in my experience, at least for Japanese films, like I think American or like other types of films get it right sometimes, but I've never come across a Japanese film that got a club scene right, at least in the way that I wanted it to be.
Yeah.
It's either like seedy, druggy, like or whatever, or like kind of just too like I don't know, bro-y or something.
Right.
But I love going to clubs where people like actually listen to the music. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like they're actually like completely immersed in the sounds and the vibrations of the subwoofer and all that stuff. And so that's what I was like trying to portray. And so, yeah,
I think you did it perfectly.
Oh, good. Yeah. I'm glad.
Speaking on this line, or a line about music, I would love to talk about the score of the film.
Yeah.
And particularly the 2 pieces of score that bookend the film, the very like pulsating, like the very loud score that starts up the film and ends it on starts on that freeze frame that you use in the ending of your film. We can talk about the ending, I guess, a little more in detail later, but I want to ask about this book ending of this score and what was your intention with that?
Yeah, sure. So Leah Ouyang-Rusli, the composer, actually Leah also went to Wesleyan.
Oh, awesome.
A little older than me, but I guess like the main thing that I asked them to do with the beginning and end song was to make music that feels like moment in history is coming to an end. And I kind of let them just like go wild with that. We were a little bit more particular with the other music that comes into play in the like not the bookends, but for the beginning and end song, I was kind of just like, just go big and be historical, and
it's a big moment in their personal history.
Exactly. It's like, I mean, because it is a story about a society, but like a era coming to an end personally. You know, I think I really wanted it to feel like that.
Right.
And especially in the beginning, one of the things that I was really trying to do was to make it feel like a tale that's being told to you, which is why there's the intertitles, but also the way that the music comes in, and also the first shot. I really wanted to feel like a almost like a folklore, like a tale.
And you get that. You open, like, fade into the buildings, and then you tilt down.
Yeah.
It's like you set the setting very well.
Yeah. And so, and then having that come in at the very beginning, and then only having it return at the very end, I feel like I was hoping that, you know, over the course of the film, you felt like that era. You saw the era. You know what I mean? So that was the main thought behind that.
That's great. I was curious what you thought about their relationship at the end of the film.
Yeah.
So Yuta basically takes the blame for the prank that gets pulled on the principal. And in my opinion, like, that was his, I guess, bold move in solidarity with the other kids. And Ko realizes that, oh yes, he's not just like the same old guy I've known for years. Like, he actually, I guess, has a political conscience or something. And that ending shot of the two of them separating on that bridge also feels like an ending of that friendship in a small way. It's kind of bittersweet when they join together in that freeze frame and then they leave each other afterwards. Where do you want to place the audience at the end? Or is it like interpret it how you will?
That's up to you. Okay. No, but, you know, I think your read of the situation is really right. I think I didn't want to portray these characters. I mean, obviously, it's the whole age-old thing of, like, everybody's flawed. You know, everyone has their reasons, all that stuff. And I feel like Ko, although he becomes really political, he's still, like, growing. And he's... compared to other people, like, maybe he can't shake the personal consequences and the relationship he has with his mom and the expectation that his mom has for him. Like, he couldn't shake those things enough to, like, end with the principal, like, to really feel courageous enough to, like, present himself, you know, even though that would have helped the movement of the students. I think at that point, as you were saying, like, Yuta, although maybe not as articulately conscious as Ko or Fumi, like, he also realizes something about his privilege and the ability that he has to take risks, and how much of a buffer he has compared to his friend Ko and all that stuff. And so he takes the blame. And, you know, I kind of do portray, in a way, Yuta as, like, a maybe apolitical character compared to Ko, but actually Yuta is quite anarchist as well. You know, he's, like,
just in existence.
Exactly. Like, he's a naturally really, like, rebellious and kind of anarchist guy who makes those choices. And his mind goes straight to actually direct action, you know, in a way, more than Ko does. In a way, because Ko and Fumi and these students are kind of appealing to authorities and of positions of power to, like, do the right thing. And they see, like, a larger picture of, like, surveillance and authoritarianism, which is what they're fighting against. But Yuta is kind of saying, like, well, we don't need to appeal to that. We can just do it ourselves, you know? And so, in a way, like, Yuta is also quite radical. And I feel like the final act is also really radical, which is like being in solidarity by sacrificing himself in a way. And I think Ko also really recognizes that, because at the bridge scene at the end, Ko offers to get dinner at his house again. And so they want to talk to each other about everything that happened. But, like, in a way, too much has happened to really say anything. And so the best that Yuta can do is, like, his nipple twist thing. And the best Ko can do is to invite him to dinner as usual. But, like, and, you know, I think that's, like, probably their MO, which is, like, twisting each other's nipples and going to dinner together and all that stuff. But, like, what they really want to do is talk. And even though maybe their friendship in the way that it was has come to an end at that point, I think Yuta's kind of final nipple twist is, like, a moment where Yuta's saying like, well, we're still a little bit the same. I think it's also like the nipple twist is like Yuta's kindness in a way.
Okay, yeah.
He's like, because he clearly Ko's like feels really bad, right? And by Yuta doing the nipple twist, Yuta's saying like, don't worry, it's gonna be fine. And so actually the act of nipple twisting is Yuta like having grown up a lot.
Ooh, yeah. I love when you put it like that.
I thought about this a lot. I was like, what does a nipple twist
What does it mean?
How do we place the nipple twist?
What about that choice to not end on the freeze frame and then and continue a bit after that?
Yeah.
I was wondering because like I guess other filmmakers might have just ended on the nipple twists and not continued past it. But it's sort of it's like this beautiful thing that you do in this film is like this tonal balance between like comedy and friendship and also like sadness that yes.
No, I mean that's exactly the reason. I feel like well, actually, to be honest, there was another scene after that scene in the script, and I cut it out in the editing process.
Okay.
And so originally, like after that scene of them like separating at the bridge, we follow Yuta to his new apartment that he goes to see.
Okay.
But it's kind of getting long, and I also didn't want to put too much of an emphasis on one character over the other.
Yes.
I wanted it to still be like two protagonists. And so I, in editing with Albert, who's also one of the producers, we were saying like, oh, maybe like we can cut that last scene out and then end it on the bridge. But at first, actually, we didn't have the freeze frame. And yeah, I don't know. We were just like tinkering around and trying to figure out what the best balance was at the end. And as you were saying, like for me, like the best emotion, like my favorite emotion is laughter through tears. Like I love laughing and crying.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Whatever movie that can give me that is like such a good movie, right? And that's what I was aiming for as well. And so I'm so happy that you said that. So one day, as a joke, Albert actually did the freeze frame, and then he put like the most exaggerated, like dramatic music. At first, we didn't have the score, so he just put something else in, and then he was like, "Ha ha ha ha!" Like, look what I made, and then played it for us, and me and Aiko, and then we watched it and we were like, "Holy shit!" Like,
it works.
Yeah, I was like, "Ha ha ha!" Like, so ridiculous. But then, like, as I watched it, and the longer the freeze frame was, I was like, "Wait a minute." And I had like one tear like coming down. I was like, oh my gosh, like the friendship. And then it kind of goes back to normal. It stops after the freeze frame, and then you see them in motion again. And like getting that laughter and then seeing the reality that kind of comes back at you, to me was actually like the most devastating thing. And so
you get that in that elongated freeze frame. You give us enough time to really contemplate that moment.
I forgot how much time we froze, but it was apparently 29 seconds, kind of a long freeze frame. And but yeah, it's like the moment that it freezes and the music comes in, it's so ridiculous that actually it's really funny. But then the longer you look at the image and the more you like think about everything that had happened, I feel like it actually gets sadder and sadder. And then the like kicker is really when it goes back into motion. You see Yuta like watching Ko as he walks down the stairs, and the way that Ko walks down the stairs is also like really hesitant and like, I just felt like everything was in there, and so I was like, Albert, I think we need to keep this. And he was like, no, I think I did it as a joke. And I was like, no, this is the ending. Like, I think we have to definitely keep this.
That's great.
And so that's why the ending is there.
That's awesome.
It's kind of awesome that it started as a joke as well. I feel like that's where the humor comes in,
Could you speak about this, I guess, creative relationship that you have both with Aiko and with Albert? Because you guys have been working on projects for a few years together, right?
Yeah, I mean, as we'd all been friends for a really long time, and then the first film that we worked on was The Chicken, so it was really just the first fiction thing that I did, and Sugar Glass Bottle as well, we all did together, and so Albert didn't produce it, but he edited Sugar Glass Bottle. Yeah. And so we're all friends, and I feel like there's like that meta narrative of like, we're making a film about friends, but like the creative team are also friends. And we're also going through like a lot of the things that like these characters are going through together. And I don't know, it's like the thing that Aiko is always talking about is like, it's such, a film just takes so long to make. And even after the film is made, it's like super long and it just never ends really. And so you kind of have to make it with people you like and are friends with. And I feel like that's sort of why, I don't know, the project feels really blessed because I made it with a bunch of really close friends.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Last thing that I want to talk about before we close out is, I guess you've been very outspoken about your support of Palestine when promoting the film. Like when you brought the film to festivals, you've like called out festivals who have been invested in the Israeli destruction of Palestine. I was very happy to see that because I feel like in the film world or in the festival world, you don't really get a lot of filmmakers that are very outspoken about this. And I just wanted to ask you about your, not specifically why, because like we all know why, but I guess your choice to do that and carry that with the film.
Yeah, totally. I mean, first of all, I'm not necessarily trying to be political through the film. Like I think the film is its own thing that captured an emotion that I felt. And so I don't really have like a political message through the film.
Right.
That being said, what grounds the film is like one of my analysis of colonialism that we talked about, especially in Korea, like the Japanese colonialism of Korea is settler colonialism, and also in Manchuria. And actually what Israel is doing to Palestine right now is really similar to what Japan did to a lot of countries in Asia. And so one of the things that I am really critical of is colonial violence, right? And so just like, I don't know, the themes of the film also just really point towards how I understand what is going on in Palestine right now. The other thing is, separate to the film though, like I think everybody has a responsibility, especially if you're American, but even if you're not American, to do something about Palestine because it's our money that's going into genocide. It's really America's genocide, to be honest. I mean, it's Israel and America.
Like a proxy state.
Exactly. And so we are completely, our hands are bloody and we need to, the least we can do is to do something, anything about it, to try to stop it. And it's really atrocious and really disappointing that the majority of people in the film industry aren't doing or saying anything because they are worried or something about their careers, maybe. Or, and of course, in Germany, it's just like really intense. And but I think in America, it's still not that far. Like it's not to the point where the state is literally revoking your citizenship if you criticize Israel, which is what Germany's doing. Still in America, we have the freedom, although there's a lot of risk, I guess, of getting fired or whatever. But come on, like fucking say something about the genocide. Like say you're against it. And especially like for me, what I learned through cinema is human dignity, you know, and like having human dignity is like the main thing that I take away from movies. And so I'm like, to all these film people who are like not doing anything or not saying anything, like what the fuck have you learned from movies? Like why are you even in cinema if you're not like caring about, and especially because like the way that we're accessing this information about the genocide is through images. And like, so it's the people who have the most literacy of images who should, in my view, like should be taking away from cinema, like lessons about humanity and human dignity. Like, what are you doing if you're not saying something?
It puts you in a weird position because these are your sort of like your peers, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I've had like some personal relationships also kind of sour, like the movie, because now I can't trust you if you're not doing something about Palestine, you know? So basically, I think as a filmmaker, director with a movie with the privilege that I have of going to all these festivals. Like, people literally just listen to me now. Like, I'm on this podcast.
Yeah.
And the audience looks at me. Yeah. And so sometimes it's an audience, it's a theater full of like hundreds of people.
Yeah.
And I have a chance to speak and have all these people listen. And so what I try to do is try to use that platform to say something in Palestine, or at least show my solidarity with Palestine.
Yeah.
It's a little bit of a shame, to be honest, that like an act as simple as wearing a keffiyeh is like noteworthy, because I don't think it is necessarily, but that's how few people do it.
Right.
What's very positive, though, is having done that, I've actually not really gotten that much flack for it. I think a lot of people are like really scared about the risks or whatever. I haven't experienced anything aside from like one guy booing at me, I guess, but like that's it.
Yeah.
And what it has given me is actually really incredible and deep connections with other people who care about Palestine or who are Palestinian themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So it's only brought positive things for me at least. Like, it's just really grown my relationships and networks of solidarity and trust in like other people who also care about Palestine.
Yeah. And it's great, like, even like thinking about Japan. Like, I have a good friend that lives in Japan, and she's been speaking about how like often protests have been going on about Palestine, and how like willing everyone is to give their time and effort. And
thankfully in Japan, Hezbollah propaganda has not made it into Japanese infrastructure as hard as America or Germany or Europe. And so actually the work to be done is to like educate people and like actually literally raise awareness. And so that's what we've been kind of up to. And on the side of filmmaking, actually, the kind of core film team, including me and Aiko and some other producers and I, have really been talking about how we can incorporate PACB, so the Palestinian Academic and Cultural Boycott of Israel, into literally our film work. And so in our contracts, for example, with the sales agent or distribution companies, we have a clause in there that says like, we need you to like basically like boycott Israeli institutions. And so I don't know how consequential the film industry is as a front of the battle against Zionism is, but in every domain, we have to fight against it and resist against it, I think. And so that's what we're trying to do.
Yeah. Thank you so much for all the hard work you've been doing.
We haven't been doing enough because it's continuing, so we got to keep going.
Yeah. Maybe one more question, because this is sort of a bit of a doubt.
Sure.
But is there anything that you're working on right now? Could you speak about like future projects, another narrative feature? Hopefully?
Yeah. We have a couple of ideas in the works. The one that I'm really excited about is actually one that Aiko and I will be writing. It's kind of Aiko's story.
Awesome.
It's based on Aiko's childhood of her going on a trip abroad for the first time.
Oh, wow.
And so I think it'll also have a lot of humor in it.
Very nice.
And for me, like I really just want to continue to like cultivate the comedy and humor. I really like that. There's something about comedy and humor that really just does it for me. I really love it.
Yeah. And it's quite ageless.
Yeah. I mean, for me, I really love Lubitsch, like Ernst Lubitsch.
Yes. Fellow Lubitsch head.
Yeah, a huge Lubitsch head. And I really, my personal project right now is actually, I really want to look into how Lubitsch sets up all of his stories. He has the best like intros. Like he has the best exposition of story.
Yes.
And I'm like, man, I really wish I could do that, So I'm going to go on a journey of dissecting Lubitsch.
Nice.
Lubitsch Act 1s, I guess. That's what's next, I guess.
Very, very exciting. We're looking forward to seeing that when it comes out.
Thanks.
Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
Yes, and thank you for this film.
Of course.
Once again, thank you so much to Neo Sora and to Aiko Masubuchi for making the time to talk to me. And please, if you haven't caught it yet, please make sure to catch Happyend in a theater near you when it opens. Thank you for listening to this episode of Deep Cut. Please rate and review us because that helps us keep making the show and also helps others discover the show as well. Be sure to subscribe to us wherever you listen to podcasts so you'll know when our next episode drops. You can keep up with Deep Cut on Instagram, Facebook, and Letterboxd at Deep Cut Pod. You can also join us to talk about movies on our Discord server. We also have a Patreon. If you want to support us, we deeply appreciate it. Click the link in our description or go to deepcutpod.com to find our Patreon, Discord, and all the other socials that we've mentioned here. Special shout out to our Patreon supporter, Leah Lai. We cannot do the show without you. Deep Cut is hosted and produced by us, Wilson Lai, Benjamin Yap, and Eli Sands, and our cover art is designed by Justina Yam, and our theme song is composed by the one and only Eli Sands. I'm Wilson. Take care, and we're looking forward to talking about more movies with you next time.